One important subsection of human development is cognitive development. Cognitive psychology is a scientific study of mind and mental function, including learning, memory, perception, reasoning, and decision making. Jean Piaget is a well-known cognitive psychologist who, while working with children in intelligence tests, noticed something interesting about the way children explain answers to the questions presented to them. Before Piaget, it was thought that children were not able to think as well as adults because of their inability to answer questions similarly to adults, but through experience and observation, Piaget was able to state that children think in a completely different way than adults. He produced cognitive developmental stages that outline the mental maturation of a human as they proceed through life, now called Piaget stages of cognitive psychology. Under cognitive development lies the development of morality, the way we distinguish what is right and what is wrong. Piaget wanted to know more about how children think, so he carried out a test to see if the age they are coincides with the moral reasoning, the thinking process one goes through when deciding whether something is right or wrong. He asked kids in different age groups questions following a story in which something goes wrong or someone does something bad.
From the results of his study, he concluded that there are two types of moral thinking, heteronymous and autonomous. Heteronymous is moral realism, morality imposed from the outside, and happens usually from 5 to 9 years of age, while autonomous morality is moral relativism, morality based on your own rules, occurring at 9 to 10 years of age. Jean Piaget published his works in the 1920s, but his thoughts on moral development were not fully supported. However, Piaget highly influenced the works of Lawrence Kohlberg in the 1950s. Kohlberg came up with what is now famously known as Kohlberg's moral stages. Kohlberg essentially had the same idea as Piaget. He brought it further by breaking down Piaget's two types of morality into levels and even further stages and assigning them ages.
The three levels of Kohlberg stages are pre-conventional, conventional, and post-conventional morality. Pre-conventional is estimated to be seen leading up to the age of 9. This level had two stages, punishment, obedience, and personal reward. This stage lines up with Piaget's cognitive stages in that the age ranges coincides with our cognitive development, evidence that morality is affected by age. Children in this age range are more egocentric and are just starting to view things symbolically. When a child is in his first stage, punishment/obedience, he or she is driven to do an action and views it as good or bad solely on the consequence that it follows. A child in this stage is likely to do an action if they believe that they will be rewarded, and is not likely to do this action if they believe they will be punished. Similarly, the second stage, personal reward, is a stage at which the child is highly influenced by what they desire, what their goal is for doing an action. One coin term for this stage is, "You can scratch my back, I scratch yours." Conventional starts at adolescence and moves into adulthood. The two stages, good interpersonal relationships and maintaining social order under this level, illustrate the impact that growing older, being exposed to more complex situations, have on morality. People in the third stage will see being good as nice and will rely on the relationship with or the personality of a person to judge them as good or bad. Moving on to the fourth stage, the adolescent becomes aware of the laws of society and obeying them become a procedure that is followed to keep order and avoid guilt. At this stage, the person is reviewing rules and punishment differently. It becomes less and less clear-cut whether something is right or wrong. The post-conventional level is a level that very few people reach due to abstract thinking that the last two stages require. Stage 5, social contract and individual rights, is the stage in which the individual understands that the rules are for the good of the greater number, but it's possible for the individual to be hurt by these rules. Stage 6, universal principles, is the last stage. This is the stage where an individual is driven by their own principles of what is good or bad. This requires more abstract thinking. The individual understands that these principles are more important and will risk any consequences in order to defend these principles.
The way that Kohlberg tested this theory was by presenting his subject with a dilemma-filled story, a story that has now become very famous called the Heinz dilemma, is a story in which Heinz, a man with a sick wife, is unable to pay for her medication and is faced with the options of stealing the medication, breaking the law, or letting his wife die. Similarly, in our observation, we asked our subjects to read the following story and answer 4 questions that will allow us to assess which stage they are expressing. These questions are very similar to the ones Kohlberg asked his subjects.
Some developmental psychologists challenge Kohlberg's theory on moral development. Carol Gilligan, one of the Kohlberg's critics, suggested he developed the model based off of the responses of voice only.
It is a possibility that gender-based developmental differences occur in how we develop our morals and ethics.
According to Gilligan, boys and men are more concerned with the rules and abstract principles of justice than girls. Gilligan contrasted her morality of care with Kohlberg's morality of justice, and she criticized Kohlberg's for only stressing about the masculine side of the issue. Gilligan said, for the very traits that traditionally have defined goodness of women, their care for the sensitivity to the need of others are those that mark them as deficient in moral development. Jonathan Haddett, another critic of Kohlberg, did early research on negative moral emotions such as disgust, shame, and vengeance, and more positive moral emotions, such as admiration, awe, and moral elevation, and proposed the moral foundations theory. Haddett applies his theory of moral foundations to examine the distinct cultures with a specific interest in the liberal and conservative political cultures in America. Additionally, Haddett observes the social political views of an individual are more primary determinant of moral judgments within a culture. Haddett's theory explains how the role of culture in parents, especially for young children, plays a significant role in the moral decision-making process for individuals at any stage of Kohlberg's theory of development. Haddett notes cultural norms and culturally shaped emotions have a substantial impact on the domain of morality and the process of moral judgment.
These criticisms are what have driven us to repeat Kohlberg's study. We want to see how gender and age, as well as the advancement of our understanding of moral development since Kohlberg's time, may have indeed impacted the accuracy of Kohlberg's study. We asked children, high schoolers, and adults to read the story and reply to the questions that followed with as much detail as possible.
These are the answers to the question: should the administration fire both Tanya and Robert?
These 2 adults may be displaying all of the points that Kohlberg, Gilligan, and Haddett have made. While it is evident that these adults have indeed passed the conventional level of morality, given that they understood there are no extremes in this scenario, but rather differing viewpoints, there are some variables that point toward Gilligan and Haddett's argument. The male had more specific explanations and alert to principles of justice, possibly supporting Gilligan's point. The different ways that they responded is also in line with Haddett's argument that culture one is exposed to has an impact on their morality. When asked the same question, teenagers answer more precisely, unlike the adults who had a harder time giving a specific answer. When examining some of these questions closer, we saw arguments about privacy or intentions. We concluded that this is part of a typical teen culture. This supports Kohlberg's conventional level because as teens we are viewing morality in terms of interpersonal relationships, wanting to gain approval from our peers while trying to obtain independence. Again, we can see how Haddett may have been correct about cultural effects because we are living in a particular individualistic society which may have impacted the answers.
When reviewing the results of the children, all children displayed a pre-conventional level of moral reasoning. This is because the children created arguments for Tanya's innocence in the story because Robert was doing something he was not supposed to be doing. The children that participated in our demonstration chose the non-bad option in order for the main character to avoid the most severe punishment. However, these children also displayed conventional moral reasoning. When both Tanya and Robert had to face consequences, the children chose to maintain social order and have both fired because they both did something wrong.
Robert being the one to blame, but has seen what it is like raising a child, and in effect wanted mercy on Robert.
Like she said, he has a newborn baby, which takes a lot of money because you have to pay for the clothes, the milk, the powder, And also that he has to pay rent. So yeah, and if it's for a house for 3 or 4, yeah, that would cost a lot of money.
Morality is something that we use in our daily lives and something we've been exposed to since early childhood. We are still trying to completely understand what it means today. Kylie Hanlon is an associate professor as well as a Canadian Research Department chair at the University of British Columbia. Her expertise is in developmental psychology, specifically in examining the human tendency to judge actions as good or bad, as deserving of reward or punishment, and if morally praiseworthy or blameworthy.
Our social relationships are the most important things in our lives, potentially. Humans think about other people pretty much all the time. We want to know what others do for work and what their preferences are and all this kind of stuff, but what we really want to know is, are they someone who's going to be good to me, friends with me, are they on my team, or aren't they? And I think that actually when we think about how much we ponder the social world, really what we're interested in is who's good and who's bad.